World War, Germany was divided between the USSR and the Allied nations. Berlin, which is the capital city, was divided in half also, even though it was right smack in the middle of East Germany. In 1948, West Berlin, the one little bit of freedom in East Germany, was walled off from the rest and blockaded. The Iron Curtain became made of concrete. The USSR would allow nothing to come into the city from outside. What this meant was that the people in West Berlin couldn't get food or medical supplies or clothing. They couldn't see their families or even get to their jobs or schools if they happened to work or go to school on the other side of that wall. The United States and our allies started flying in supplies. Supply planes flew in over East Germany, dropped off the life-saving supplies, and flew out again day and night for nearly a year. And then the USSR realized that their blockade wasn't going to work, and they began allowing supplies to come in more regular ways. 25 years ago today, the Berlin Wall came down. It did not require heavy equipment or special demolition experts. As soon as the word was spread that the wall was to come down, people from all over both halves of the city came to the wall and took it down with their bare hands. Like that. Sledgehammers and little hammers and people with buckets carrying away rubble. At first, the people on the east were held back by soldiers who were supposed to be there to keep order, but, it wasn't long before the surge of humanity flowing up and over and through the wall was too much for them. And besides, they had family on the other side, too. Families were reunited for the first time in 4 decades. Around the world, people watched as the main symbol of communist oppression was destroyed by ordinary people. A few weeks later, the Soviet Union, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, would fall apart. In the West, it was celebrated as the dawning of a new and wonderful age of freedom in the world. Pieces of the wall were gathered up and sold as souvenirs. I have one. There is a large piece at Chapman University. I also have, on here, there's a little tiny pin that would be Lenin on the pin. And if you do not know who Lenin is, perhaps it is time for a world history lesson, but not right now. I also have a small Russian doll. I was given these items by a Russian girl I met a few weeks later, just a couple of weeks after the wall started to come down. I met her while I was in a drug and alcohol rehab. Natasha, which is not her real name, and a few other people were there. They were part of an organization trying to combat the very high incidence of alcoholism in Russia, in Moscow particularly. They were in the U.S. studying drug and alcohol rehab facilities and 12-step programs because there was nothing like that in the USSR. Natasha herself was a sober alcoholic. She loved meeting new people and hearing new stories, and she loved giving them small presents, little souvenirs of Russia. I remember how upset and worried she was about the wall coming down and the USSR breaking up. She agreed that freedom was a very good thing, but you see, life in the USSR was all she knew. She didn't know what changes would come into her life now. She was worried about what the future would bring. Moses has died. Aaron is gone, and so is Miriam. The entire generation of Hebrews who had originally left Egypt, they're all dead and gone, every one. Joshua has been named as the successor to Moses and Aaron and is poised to lead the Hebrews into the promised land. He stood before the Hebrews at the very border to the new land and said to the assembled tribes, "Serve the Lord, the God of Abraham and Isaac, the one who sent Moses to deliver you, and serve him faithfully. Because if you turn back to worshiping other gods, or if you don't obey the laws that Moses brought to you from God, he will turn against you, no matter what good was done in the past. He said, I don't care what choice you all make, but I and my family, my servants and slaves, and everywhere he was in any way a part of my household, my tribe, or my clan, all of us, I and my house, we will serve the Lord. And of course the Hebrews, with the smell of that milk and honey in their nostrils, cried out, yes, we will serve the Lord. How could we not when he has been so good to us all this time? Be careful, Joshua warned. Because if you disobey, he will turn against you, no matter what good has been done in the past. And the Hebrews answered, no worries. We will always obey God. He is the one who brought us to this place. They stood on the brink of the promised land. The thing they'd been looking forward to and praying for 4 decades. They would finally have the freedom that they had from just beyond the river, just on the other side of the wall, as it were. They would have their land, their families, everything their hearts desired was on the other side. It would be a new age of freedom in the land. God had led them there, and they were so happy. They were grateful. Oh, yes, they were happy for the new freedom and the new land that they were going to be getting. They would definitely be faithful to the one who brought them here. But, you know, somebody had seen giants there a while back. What if there were giants? He will turn against you, no matter what good has been done in the past. See, that's the kind of God I grew up with. That so-called Old Testament God. I would never be good enough because as soon as I made one mistake, it was like all the good that went before was wiped out. The one who looked for mistakes and kept track of them and punished with eternal fire. That's the one I walked away from and stayed away from for 25 years. But that's not the God I believe in today. The God I believe in is the one who kept renewing the covenant with the people of Israel, who kept going after them when they strayed from obedience and kept begging them to come back. The God I believe in is the Old Testament God. He's the one who forgave and forgot the sins of Israel over and over again throughout Judges and Kings and Chronicles. The God I believe in is the one who sent the prophets to convert them away from their sins, to prevent, if possible, their exile. And when that didn't work, to comfort them in their pain and walk with them throughout their time of sorrow. Throughout that time when they said, who can sing songs of Zion in a foreign land? The God I believe in is the one who later on would send Jesus to do the very same thing, to heal the sin-sick souls of not just the people of Israel, but all the world. But you know, even on that day, on the brink of the promised land, even that day, Joshua should have known that his statement about God wasn't entirely true. Remember the golden calf? God forgave the Hebrews after that. And the why did God bring us here to starve incident? God forgave their lack of faith, even fed them quail and manna. We're going to die of thirst, they said. Why did we ever leave Egypt and the gods we knew there? God forgave that too, and gave them sweet water from the rock to drink. This God, who would turn away, desert the Hebrews, would forget all the good that had been done if they disobeyed, that was not the God that the people had experienced during the 40 years of their travels. Just because none of the original exiles were still alive
didn't mean there weren't still some who remembered
those events, those times of disobedience and forgiveness. The God that they already knew wasn't a God who would desert them when they disobeyed, because they would disobey. They are people, after all. The Hebrew Bible consists of books and books full of stories, one after the other, that tell of the disobedience of Israel, and tell about a God who would stand by them through thick and thin, and care for them and forgive them over and over again, and help them get through the worst times, no matter how rebellious or whiny they were. The Hebrews stood on the brink of something new, something big and new and scary. They had no idea what the future would bring. What if there were giants? Natasha and the rest of the people who lived behind the Iron Curtain for so long were on the brink of a new thing, a big, new, scary thing. They had no idea what the future would bring. What if there were giants? The good news for the Hebrew people, and for us, is that even if there are giants, we have our God to turn to. Not so much for Natasha in 1989, because she told me that it was hard for her to come to understand the God parts of the 12 steps that she was learning about, because faith in anything other than the state wasn't exactly encouraged in the USSR. And with the state gone, but for us, and for the children of Israel, even if there are giants, we have our God to turn to. Even if we have ignored and hated and rejected God for 25 years the way I did. Even if we wander off to worship other gods the way the Hebrews would. Because regardless of what Joshua said that day, regardless of what many, many preachers have said ever since then, regardless of what many people believe, ours is a God filled with grace, who loves us unconditionally, who will always welcome us home again, no matter what. And yes, there will be punishment, usually of our own making, consequences of our own actions and inactions. But always and forever, there will be forgiveness, acceptance, care, and love. Always and forever, we will be accepted just as we are. For we are God's beautiful and beloved children. Joshua said, "Don't really care what the rest of you decide, but for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And I say the same. Here in this house, we will serve the Lord.
Amen.